Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I want to do another round of recent reads talking about horror books I have received for review, as well as a couple things I've been reading with my book club for the last few months. Before I get started, I want to do another Booktuber shout out, and this time I want to shout out Marcy's channel. She is a fantastic horror Booktuber that reads a lot of new releases as well as a lot of indie titles. She is a big supporter of the Nightworms, so if you are also a subscriber and looking for a lot of reviews of the books that you're getting in those packages, she's really good, admittedly a lot better than me, at getting to those books in a timely fashion and getting you feedback on what she thinks. She just has great energy on camera. She does fantastic readathons and really supports women in horror and diverse horror. She is one of the people who got me really excited to read Tender is the Flesh, and I thank her for it. So if you're not subscribed to her channel, highly recommend it. It's going to be linked in the description box and in the cards, so definitely go check her out after you're done here. All that being said, let's get started with the books that I read this month. First, I read Samurais of Fukushima by Hugo Lawrence Cukurs, and this is a book that I received from the author for review. And this is a book that is set in ancient Japan and follows a group of samurai that are having to go on the run because there is an uprising of zombies. I do not accept a lot of indie titles for review, but this is one that I immediately said yes to because if you don't know, which you probably do, your girl loves some zombie fiction, and I also happen to love fantasy stories that are set in Asian-inspired worlds, especially historical ones. So when I got this email requesting that I look at his book, I was like, oh my gosh, this book is written for me, so I was very excited to do so. I did get a chance to listen to the audiobook version, and while the narration was fine, I've definitely been spoiled by some really amazing narrators, and I don't know if he really added to the performance. So I'm actually tempted to say that you might want to read the ebook or physical copy of this one, but personally I did enjoy the story. Particularly what I liked about it was the elements of the setting, so getting to hear about the samurai, their swords, their traditions, all of that was really interesting to me, and definitely took the very classic story of zombie fiction, which admittedly is kind of tired at this point. We have all read so many of those stories, but I felt like the setting really breathed new life into the genre, and so I like those elements. It's not, I don't believe, an own voices story, but it seemed at least like the author did a lot of research because there was a lot of really good details that I found really interesting. In terms of the zombie fiction itself, like I said, you have people on the run, traveling, trying to escape the zombies. It wasn't overly gruesome, and I did find it enjoyable, but at the core of zombie fiction, for me, it usually comes down to getting really attached to the characters and so caring and worrying for their well-being, and I didn't personally have that. The author definitely took time to give everyone backstories, but for whatever reason, I just didn't really connect with them. So wasn't a perfect read for me, but like I said, if you have similar buzzwords when it comes to fiction as I do, if you love that setting, if you just cannot get enough of zombies, it's definitely one you might want to try out for yourself. Next up, we have A Broken Darkness by Premee Mohamed, which is a book I received from the publisher. This is technically the second book in a duology that starts with Beneath the Rising, and I will have a link to my review of the first book if you're interested. Of course, I'm going to keep this discussion really spoiler-free so you can keep watching, but basically the setup of the first book is you have two childhood best friends that grew up together and have this great bond, and then they meet again as adults. The woman is actually this brilliant scientist, and so she discovers a way to make clean energy, but by doing so she accidentally rips a hole in the universe, causing these ancient gods to get out and seek mayhem across the world. And so that is the setup for the first book, and this story of course continues on from there. And I'll say that I'm not normally a fan of cosmic horror, but I liked this one quite a bit, and a lot of that is the fact that once again the characters are really at the heart of the story. I love the relationship between these best friends and the complications of their relationships, and I didn't love the second book as much as the first, but that tends to be something that I do find with a lot of sequels, is that the idea is fresher when you read it the first time, and then when you revisit it in the second book it's just not quite as interesting. But again, I thought the character work was very well done, and I do have an appreciation for cosmic horror, but it's not my favorite. So if you really like that subgenre, you'll probably like this book even more than I did. Obviously you got to start back at the beginning, but it is well worth it, and I'm definitely glad I got a chance to read this sequel. So now let's switch gears and talk about a few books that I read with my Patreon book club. If you're interested in joining, links down below in the description box. But for the month of February, we always vote and choose a theme. And so they decided to go with true life horror. And the book that got voted and chosen was The Demonologist by Gerald Brittle, which essentially is the real life story of this couple, the Warrens, that are renowned as demonologists. They go around and hunt for ghosts and demons and just help to get them out of houses and all of that. I'm not explaining it very well. I think a lot of people are actually really familiar with this very well-known couple. I was not, because I'll be honest, kind of true life horror isn't actually a subgenre that I'm very interested in. Typically, I do prefer my fiction because of the fact that I am a huge skeptic, and that was my problem with this book. So if you're interested in those couple, if you are someone who believes in the supernatural, you believe in ghosts, you believe in haunted houses, and all of that, then you will probably like this book a lot more than I did. And I went into this book trying to keep an open mind. I actually kind of wanted this book to convince me that some of this could be real, because I want to be scared. I want it to be possible, but I found the arguments in this book really weak. So very early on in the book, the authors basically discuss the fact that there are other skeptics out there. And so the author, Gerald Brittle, asked the Warrens, well, how do you respond when someone wants proof? And their response is, well, no one's ever proved that the supernatural doesn't exist, so that proves that it does. And I find that logic so flawed. So I do want to be careful in this review that I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone who, again, believes in ghosts and things like that. Obviously, I love reading about those topics in my fiction, but personally, I just don't have a lot of belief that that actually is happening in real life. And because of that, I was just the wrong audience for this book. So keep that in mind. And again, I do not mean to talk down to anyone who feels differently, but yeah, I basically should not have read this book. I wouldn't have read this book except for my book club, but in some ways it is fun because they do push me to read books that are totally out of my little wheelhouse and try different things, and sometimes they're hits and unfortunately sometimes they're misses, like this one. Then in March, the theme was sci-fi horror, a subgenre I really do like, and I was very excited for the book that they selected. That is Contagion by Erin Bowman. The premise of this book sounded fantastic, following a group of crew members that get a distress call and they go to investigate another ship, only to find that everyone on the ship is dead. Basically, this reads like a really classic sci-fi horror movie, which admittedly I have not actually watched a lot of, but I am at least aware of them. And so this was just a really fun read. I do need to specify that this book is actually young adult, which I did not know going into it. And for the most part, I really do prefer to read adult science fiction. So a lot of my quibbles with this book really came from the fact that I was definitely aware I was reading a book intended for a younger audience. No shame to those that love YA, but it just doesn't always personally work well for me, and I try not to pick up books that I don't expect I'm going to like. But despite the fact that it did fall into some of the YA tropes, it was still really fun. It was very readable. I flew through it. It is the first book in a duology, and I did decide not to continue on because while the first book doesn't really have romance, I hear that there is more in the second and has a lot more of that teenage angst that I just can't stand. But again, if you're a fan of movies like Event Horizon, Alien, this book has a very similar feel. My patrons really enjoyed it overall, and yeah, just had a lot of fun with it. So definitely, again, out of my wheelhouse, not an age category I tend to pick up, but I love science fiction and horror when they come together, and this one was really good blend. I love the characters, I hated the bad guys, and was so happy when bad things started to happen. And so if that sounds like a lot of fun, definitely you might want to try it for yourself. And last, in April, we read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira. This is a book that was a reread for me, so I'm not going to talk about it at length. If you don't know, it follows a group of scientists that go off to the Marianas Trench to look for the crew of a previous mission that were off to film a mockumentary all about mermaids. Something went wrong, the first ship disappeared, and so now there is a crew going to find out what happened and try to get some scientific explanation behind it. This is actually another book that is deep sea horror and sci-fi horror, so again, kind of hitting a lot of my buzzwords. And yeah, I loved it the first time. I loved it perhaps even more the second time around, and would definitely recommend it. I feel like I talked about this book all the time because it fits into so many recommendation topics. So that's why I'm trying to keep it brief here, but it is a personal favorite of mine. I just like the fact that it goes into the biology of the mermaids, and it makes it feel so possible that I almost forgot that mermaids didn't exist. And I've said it before that like these are not Disney mermaids, these are terrifying creatures. This is a creature feature. It is gruesome and horrifying and fun and all that good stuff. So definitely not for the faint of heart, but if you read a lot of horror like myself, I actually don't think it's that bad. But if you read more science fiction, this one will definitely have those threads of horror. If you're looking for that, just, you know, be aware what you're getting yourself into. So overall, you know, it's been some really fun last months in the book club, and yeah, I'll keep you posted what we read as the year goes on. So that's it for this video. I'd love to hear of the books I mentioned. Which ones are you interested in checking out for yourself? And I'd also love you to recommend me your favorite sci-fi horror books because I cannot get enough of the genre. If you're not already subscribed, consider doing so. I do read a lot of horror as well as thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy. And also remember to go and check out Marcy's channel because I love her and I just do not feel like she gets enough appreciation online. All that being said, you can still help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, hitting that notification bell, and sharing it around on Twitter and Reddit and all those good places. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.